But without further ado, today we have Jen Mason. She is the executive director over at the Colorado Snow Sports Museum in Vail, and she's going to talk to us a lot about the 10 Mountain Division and their return.
Yes. So thank you, Jana, for inviting me from the Colorado Snow Sports Museum. I'll give you a little bit of background on the museum and then we'll jump right into it. So my name is Jen Mason and I am the executive director of the Colorado Snow Sports Museum. So we have a little bit of an identity crisis. We are located in Vail, but we are not the Vail Museum. We are truly the Colorado Snow Sports Museum. We were created in 1975 by the state of Colorado, and they were celebrating. So as we all know, Colorado is called the Centennial State because we became a state in 1876. So in 1975, they were getting prepared to celebrate our 100th birthday in the state of Colorado. And they were like, well, we clearly need a ski museum. And they chose Vail for the, if you look at a map of ski country USA in the state of Colorado, Vail is pretty much, we're still very central, and it was right there. I-70 was just built, so they were like, oh, this is perfect. So that is why we were chosen to be in Vail. And it's, it's a good thing and a bad thing, just like everything else in the world. Like it has its pros and it has its cons. But we are we have a ton of information about Breckenridge and Keystone and all of, A-Basin and all of the resorts that are in Colorado, obviously. And then we also have a really interesting table that's all digitized that has about 200 lost resorts that have come and gone, and has a big map of Colorado. And there used to be a whole bunch of like mom and pop resorts along the Front Range in the state, and most of them are gone simply because they just don't get the snow that they used to. This year, maybe a little different, but in general. And it's so interesting, and you can see, they all kind of went away, kind of in the late 80s. Things like that, not early 70s and stuff like that. They were a very popular ma-pa kind of smaller resorts back then. But so we're open pretty much 365 days a year. So, and we are complimentary. So please come visit us anytime. So that's all we're going to say about the museum today. But it is great, and we in the museum have the largest display of 10th Mountain artifacts for you to see. Like, History of Colorado has, they have more artifacts than we do, but they're not on display. And Denver, the Denver Public Library, if you're really into the 10th Mountain Division, the Denver Public Library on the 7th floor, the entire thing is dedicated. The entire floor is dedicated to the 10th Mountain Division, and that's where a lot of our resources come from. And we all three organizations work very closely together, and we share resources, we share photos. Like if some of us has a photo, like it's a very friendly and great relationship. And History of Colorado is actually putting on, it's only going to be up for 6 months, but 4,000 artifacts on the 10th Mountain Division as a temporary display. So I'm sure they'll be touting that. I'm not sure when that's coming out, but it'll be up for 6 months and then it'll go back down. So during that time, we will not be the largest, but we will go back to it. So it is pretty cool. And they're borrowing a few things that they don't have that we had. So it's pretty interesting. Do most of you know, do most of you know the story of the 10th Mountain? Minnie Dole, how it was all found? I didn't want to I wanted, because it is the 10th Mountain and their impact, but I feel like we need to obviously talk about the 10th Mountain and where it all started and everything, because maybe you'll learn something new a little bit, but I could talk for 5 hours on just the 10th Mountain Division. So, and so this is something that I put this program together I was asked by the 10th Mountain Descendant Group to give a talk, and I was like, well, these guys know more than I do. So then I was like, all right, we're really going to pick kind of the impact of the ski industry. And I will say they all raised their hand that they learned something at the end of it. So I was pretty happy about that. So I'll just quickly kind of give you the 10th Mountain 101 in about 5 minutes so that we all are on the same page. So in the early 30s, Minnie Dole was skiing on the East Coast and he broke his ankle. And you think, why does that matter? But so he broke his ankle and it was a fiasco to get him off the mountain. And he was like, nobody in their right mind is going to get their loved ones go skiing. I broke my ankle and I couldn't get home. And I couldn't get, out of here safely. So he created all the policies and procedures that they use for the National Ski Patrol today, which is pretty incredible because it's almost 100 years later. So like all of our ski resorts in the state of Colorado are using the same policies and procedures that he was using and created in 1930. It was in the mid-30s when all of that happened. And so Minnie Dole is actually in the Colorado Snow Sports Museum, not once, but twice, because he is in the 10th Mountain display, obviously. And then we have a whole display of the National Ski Patrol, and he is in there because he started that. So he's pretty influential in our industry and for the state of Colorado. So then the war broke out, and when I say the war, we mean World War II. So the war broke out, and he wrote letter after letter after letter to the War Department saying we absolutely have to create a mountain division. And this division has to be modeled after the country of Finland, because Finland used in World War I, used a lot of mountain warfare tactics. And they used reindeer. He wasn't recommending we use reindeer. He was recommending we use mules and horses. And this is at a time when the army was getting rid of animals and livestock, and they were going into more jeeps and, modern technology. And here he is. So I thought he wrote like maybe 20 or 30 letters. He wrote over 200 letters to the War Department saying we absolutely need to do this. And at this time, we were not in the war. And then December 7th happened. And of course, that's Pearl Harbor. And so he received a call from Dwight Eisenhower himself, who was not the president at the time, but he was the commander of the army at that time, and said, all right, Minnie, start your ski troops. So this is how, like, the first nickname, the 10th Mountain Division has a lot of nicknames, and this is how the first one got started. So Minnie was like, oh, shoot, okay, now what are we going to do? So then he started a whole recruitment campaign up and down. He went all up and down the East Coast, and he was looking for skiers. And so he was recruiting from Harvard, Dartmouth, Yale, University of Vermont, Middlebury, Colby, like all the schools that had ski teams. And then he also went to the Pacific Northwest. You'll meet a lot of 10th Mountain soldiers that are from the Pacific Northwest. And they didn't quite get exactly who they want. They weren't getting, enough people that they wanted. So we started a whole recruitment campaign in Wisconsin, in Michigan, and Minnesota, because he was like, they understood the great outdoors. And they understood what it meant to be cold. They understood what he was looking for. And he was looking for mountain men and kind of outdoorsmen. So they became this very elite group of men because of that whole collegiate, that he was pulling from them. And at the time, they were begging people to be in the services or to recruit them for the services. And he was asking for 3 letters of recommendation. So it again became this very elite group of men. And then the other thing that happened was not only did the collegiate skiers sign up to be part of the 10th Mountain Division, but a lot of the coaches from the ski teams and things like that also came on board with all of this. And again, so now you have professors from these elite schools and all of this stuff. And then at one point they became what they called Eisenhower Playboys. I mean, it just went, like the list went on and on and on. And they did originally train in the Pacific Northwest. And at the time, Minnie Dole and their commanding general said, this is not working for us. So we need, the Army said, well, we own this piece of land outside of Leadville, Colorado. And they were like, okay, it's perfect. So it was above 9,000 feet. It had a train station that went right to it. I don't know, at the time the recruits would go into Denver and they would change trains at Union Station, which still exists today, which is so cool. And they would come up into the mountains on the mountain train. And the train station was called Pando. So you'll see a lot of paraphernalia, you'll see things about the 10th Mountain. It'll say Pando Commando, and it's this little panda on skis. And that became their unofficial mascot, was this Pando Commando thing. But they, the Army sent a bunch of construction workers and everybody down there to create this city. And at the height of the 10th Mountain Division, when they all got there, it was 15,000 soldiers, 5,000 mules and horses. My favorite part, there were 300 dogs that lived in Camp Hale. There's all sorts of photos of them. And then the best thing was there were 200 women that lived in Camp Hale that a lot of people don't talk about. So, and they were kind of they ran the commissary, they ran the offices, they made sure that the soldiers were fed. And so literally one of them said, if it wasn't for the women, we would not have made it. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. And we are adding to our exhibit kind of a panel on the women that were there. So they trained, and as we all know, Camp Hale is located from here. From Vail, it's about 45 minutes it takes a while to get there. It's about 45, but you can go up, as you know, go up, down, you can go to Copper Mountain and go up Highway 91 and go across there. So it's probably about a 30-minute drive from here. But, and it's only 20 minutes as the crow flies from Vail Mountain, if you think about it, because Vail Mountain goes up, and then we go back, and then now we have Blue Sky. So in the backside of Blue Sky is pretty much you're really close to Camp Hale. And then also Vail Pass is really close. That's how a lot of people access it in this winter, is they go up Vail Pass on their snowmobiles and then they go down into Camp Hale. So Vail Pass is kind of becoming the front door to Camp Hale in modern day, which is pretty interesting. But at the time, the recruits went through and they got on the trains and then they were, let off. And they were there for 2.5 years. So they trained for a long time. They had this whole series called the D series that they put themselves through, and it happened in January. It was 3 weeks that they were meant to be 3 weeks away from camp, and they would they put themselves through the most rigorous tests and everything that they could do. And they actually pulled the D series. They stopped it after 2.5 weeks because they started to lose so many men. Because it was just so frigid. They were getting frostbite. But they really were training to be the best. And in 1944, they actually started to lose quite a few men because these guys wanted to see combat. They wanted to, be on the front lines. And they started to kind of bail out, and they ended up shrinking it down to about 13,000. They lost quite a few men, 13,000 men, because they were like, we're never going to see combat. And then in December of 1944, the Allies were, so if you think of Italy, it's in the shape of a boot. And what had happened was the Germans had a foothold in that part, in the Italian Apennine, in the top part of the boot. They'd been there for over 6 years. They were bunkered in like squirrels. They were there. It was a good place to be if you were a German soldier. It was high ranking officers and things were there. And what they were doing was they were using the country of Italy. As we all know, Mussolini and Hitler were kind of in cahoots with each other. And they were using the country of Italy. They were using all the port cities. They were pulling in supplies into the ports, and they were running them up the boot, and then they would use that, and they would go into that's what they called the European venue, and that's how they were supplying all the fighting that went on in that venue, in that part of the world, was all being supplied by Italy. So the Allies had tried for 18 months to break that, what they call the Gothic line, which was Riva Ridge. They tried to break that Gothic line, and someone said, send in the 10th Mountain Division. This is exactly what they've been training for. Our soldiers are depleted. We are done. And we are not getting anywhere. And so they sent the 10th Mountain in January of 1945. The 10th Mountain were deployed on the USS America, and they hit the shores in mid-January. And then, of course, the Battle of Riva Ridge occurred on February 18th, and they defeated the Germans in that region, and they pushed them back and back and back. And they did it all by the element of surprise. So Riva Ridge had 3 sides that were very easy to climb up and get to. And what they did, they had a new commanding general. His name was Commander Hayes. They used the 4th side, which was a rock wall. So they went up and over that rock wall in a blinding snowstorm. I know it sounds like a book, it sounds like a novel, but it all really did happen. And they went up and over, and his biggest thing was we cannot be heard. And we cannot, it's the element of surprise that is going to make us successful here. So all weapons were unloaded. So the 10th Mountain Soldiers that I had the honor of meeting all said it was the scariest thing, because here you are defenseless, 100% defenseless. And so they went up and over, and that was kind of how it was the element of surprise. And these guys, I mean, they were like I said, they'd been there. They thought that nothing was going to happen to them, that they were completely untouchable. And it was a rigorous battle. It was horrible. They lost over 1,800 men in a matter of 3 days, which is, the numbers are staggering. So it was but they kept pushing them back and back and back on this ridge. And finally they did, in May, but February to May is a long time, as we all know. They defeated the Germans, and the German soldiers would only surrender to the gentleman with the 10th Mountain logo on his arm, because they literally felt like they did the impossible. So that's kind of, I could talk a lot more about, that could go on all day. But that gives you kind of an example of kind of like what they went through, what they did. They did not have their skis when they defended the German, when they went into battle. They really became mountaineers at that point, because they were using their Tetons on that rock wall. They also, when they went into battle, they did not bring their mules over with them. They were using Italian mules. So their packs, when they trained, weighed 90 pounds. When they went to battle, their packs weighed 120, because the mules were smaller. I guess everything in the United States is bigger, even our mules. So the Italian mules couldn't carry as much. But so that just kind of gives you these guys, as we all know, they were the greatest generation that ever lived, and they truly did the impossible. So, and when they came back from the war, and this is why we're all here. So when they came back from the war, this is kind of where it all starts. And then the other thing I just kind of like to point out is the 2 cross bayonets are for the Roman numeral 10. And then it's in the shape of a powder keg for their explosive nature. And then the word mountain is up above. And obviously it's red, white, and blue, because of our flag is red, white, and blue. And they became the 10th Mountain because it was just the next number in line. They were the 85th Regiment, 86th and 87th. They combined when they hit a certain number. I don't know that number. And that's when they became a unit. It was just the next unit in line. So kind of a cool logo. So, and as you all know, they were up in Camp Hale for 2.5 years. So when the men returned from the 10th Mountain, there was about 2,000 of them got involved in practically every aspect of the ski industry. An incredible 38 of them are members of the U.S. and Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame. That's not our Hall of Fame, but the U.S. So to understand their impact is to know that in 1940, there were about 10,000 skiers in the United States. There's 20 million today. So, and the 10th were a huge part of this growth. So, and it truly was, they did not want to come home. Like, they did not want to come home and work in factories, and because they'd spent all this time, this amazing time at camp, like learning all the great outdoors and doing all these things, which is, we're so lucky that we all live here every day. So when these heroes came home, all they didn't want to do was fight, said one of them. Not only did they develop skiers, but a lot more than that. Exceptional men, a documented elite fighting force, that unbridled passion and love for the mountains and skiing that transcended war. So it's pretty incredible that they, that all of this started. So here we're going to so one of the quotes that I found when I was doing all this, he said, "We were a bunch of ski nuts that loved to sit around all day and talk skiing." So according to Pete Seibert in his book, The Winter Army, Dr. Eisenman claims that the 10th Mountain are the only 10th Mountain military unit in history to use their skills as a soldier to spur a civilian pastime. So this is how it all kind of started. They were the original ski bumps, said Dick Wilson, echoing Pete Seibert's sentiment. Dick edited National Skiing Magazine when they returned. We couldn't get skiing out of our blood, and we wanted to teach the country to ski, and that's what we did. One vet said, we never got tired of it. We trained in the snow all week, and we would go out on the weekends and climb, ski, or just do something else for fun. So, and like I was saying earlier, the 10th Mountain had quite a high profile while the war was raging in Europe. The Army often used them for recruitment campaigns. And this I find, they were heroes when they came home. But this I love, they did use them. So a lot of these footage and a lot of these photos that the 10th Mountain Wire, they're so documented, is because of this. So when the war was raging, the Army often used wartime propaganda because they were still looking for soldiers. So 15,000 men, not in Europe, but they were a lot of these guys ended up on the cover of Life magazine, and that's Pete Seibert, who started Vail, who was a 10th Mountain Division soldier. But I'm a little behind on the photos here. But this is some of the fun propaganda and all this crazy stuff that the army was creating here, which is so fun. I know. Yeah, it's so cool. There's so much. So then so now I'm caught up to my. So you'll see there's a ton of Life magazine and all sorts of, of 10 soldiers that are on these. One vet, speaking in the late 60s said, we were a glamour outfit, and let's face it, we milked that to death. And some people say we're still doing that today. So, which is pretty incredible. But they captured the imagination of the public, and the public never looked away, is what we kind of always say. They were just everywhere. This was part of their recruitment campaign. We actually have that original poster in the museum. So it's all, this is pretty incredible, from the 40s. So you can envision, the division being a hothouse of ski brainstorming. And they had almost 2 years at Camp Hale, which is incredible. And they were with all these like-minded men, and all these ideas were to percolate and grow. That's why not only did they start ski areas, but they got involved in every aspect of the industry when they returned. They came back and they opened ski shops and they opened ski schools. It's not, they all just weren't a Pete Seibert, They became ski instructors, patrollers, coaches, racers, and even filmmakers. Anything to be close to the mountains.
How many made it back?
So originally they were 15,000, and then they lost, they got down to about 13,000, and then they lost 2. So there was about 11,000 men that came back. That's not, that's a big number, but it's not significant. For them to do what they did is pretty incredible. It really, it's not that many of them. But they were doing, at this point when they returned, they were doing anything to be close to the mountains and to feed their love of skiing. They endowed the modern ski industry. Quite a statement, but very true. This was their thing. And another thing that they did, which a lot of people don't know, is they threw Army surplus stores. Remember, we all used to get our gear at Army surplus stores. Well, that was the 10th Mountain, trying to infiltrate and feed the industry. They were doing, all of this was on purpose. And they also gave 150,000 pairs of boots, skis, and poles to the Boy Scouts Clubs of America. You get them while they're young, right? None of this was all by accident, which was so cool. And then also, as we all know, the social and economic after World War II, there was more leisure time. Before, there wasn't this leisure, there wasn't a middle class, there wasn't time for all of this. So, so skiing in the U.S. before World War II really did not exist. As we all know, there was Sun Valley and a couple other ones. So it was pretty much reserved for the rich and the famous, and the rich and the famous. And places like Sun Valley, which opened in 1936, hosted the likes of John Wayne, Lana Turner. Like, these resorts at this time didn't, they didn't exist. So here we are, like Sun Valley, like, all the Lana, Groucho Marx. And Eastern ski resorts were populated by Ivy League elites. And alpine skiing wasn't a thing until a few years before Lake Placid hosted the Olympics in 1932, which is pretty incredible. But those Olympic Games did not have alpine skiing as a sport at that time, which was, it's only 1932, so it's pretty incredible, how these guys changed the ski jumping was considered, I don't know what's ski jumping was considered, so there's Lana Turner. Like, it was truly like a thing of the rich and famous. Like, it wasn't, and then, which is so funny that we hosted the Olympics, we being the United States in 1932. So, and then this is kind of when it all started to change. So post-war America was a much different scene. Families finally had some extra time, extra money to go out and enjoy this newfound leisure time. The economy was booming, and people wanted fun things to do. Skiing was many of the post-war activities that took off. Aspen was chosen to host the 1950 World Ski Championships, giving the U.S. the first present on the skiing world stage. So that's pretty incredible. And about that same time, the military dumped, this is when I talk about the 150,000 pair of skis into the Army surplus stores. These skis were 7 feet tall and weighed 18 pounds. Can you imagine? Skis could be bought for a couple of bucks, and boots set you back another 50 cents. This made skiing affordable and opened the door up to the masses. In addition, the military gave out free equipment to the Boy Scouts in the Colorado region. So it's pretty incredible what we've got going on.
Quick question?
Yeah.
The military was the one?
So the 10th Mountain, that gave out all those skis, yeah.
So
The 10th Mountain, yeah.
okay,
These
so I was
guys.
trying to think if Uncle Sam was paying for all this, or
Yeah,
the
well, it
Mountain
was
Division with their own
I
funding
think-
was doing it.
I think, well,
Still
still through the military, yeah. And look, I mean, this was not a scene that happened in the 30s. Like, this all started post-war. Yeah, there was not a lot of skiing. And then, of course, Aspen hosting these amazing world championships. And this is an example of the boots, and we have those obviously in our, which is so crazy. Yeah, and it was becoming very like pop culture, modern culture, So by this time, so in 1959, Time magazine said in less than 25 years, skiing has transformed from an eccentric practice pursuit by a handful of fanatics, children, young men, to be the fastest growing outdoor sports. So today, anybody skis, corporate presidents and office boys, students, secretaries, parents, children. It's no longer a pastime for the well-heeled who could afford to go to Europe. Because if you think about it, post-war war, people who were of the elite, they went to places like St. Moritz. They were going over to Chamonix and Zermatt. Like, it was not a thing. Like, it was, these were where you went skiing. And then, of course, we only had, this is in the Dolomites in Italy. So then this is kind of where it all, kind of all started. So, and these are some of the men that really, really changed the whole face of the industry. As I mentioned earlier, so Pete Seibert, we all know the Vail story, so he, maybe you don't, but, Pete was going to start a ski area no matter what. That was his passion, that was his thing. He looked all over the state, and then he ended up meeting Earl Eaton, and Pete and Earl are the reason why that Vail is where Vail is today. And as we all know, Vail, there was nothing there. Like a lot of the other ski resorts, like Crested View, Telluride, they were towns before that. But so he really made, and he pulled in, like, Vail is all 10th Mountain soldiers in the beginning. So Bob Parker, Ben Duke, these guys were all 10th Mountain soldiers. Bill Sarge Brown became our mountain manager, and Dick Wilson made the dream team. it took them a long time to create Vail, but it did finally happen. So, and these guys all knew each other. Like they were all in Aspen, like all those names, they were all in Aspen. Most of them were on the US ski team in 1950. But this is John Litchfield, and he was one of the original Aspen investors and owned the Red Onion at the time. And he was a 10th Mountain Division soldier. And so Aspen did exist before, but it was not the mega that it was today. And of course, this all started changing. And then this is a really famous Aspenite. Fiedel Pfeiffer started the Aspen Ski School, and then later thought that Aspen needed more beginner terrain. For those of you who have skied Ajax, they don't call it Ajax anymore. I think they just call it Aspen. He created Buttermilk Mountain, and then he also went down the line and created Highlands and Snowmass. So he literally turned, Aspen existed, but he turned Aspen into the ski mecca of the 4 mountains that it is today. And this is Aspen in the 1950s, which is so fun. I know. That's Fiedel Pfeiffer. And then this is Alf Engen. So obviously it's not just related to Colorado. If any of you have been to Snowboard or Park City, they have this amazing museum, and it's named after Alf Engen. He is from Utah, and he started the ski school at Alta. They all couldn't start ski areas, you know what I mean? But he started the ski areas there. And then I always find that this is pretty incredible. So Cliff Taylor is a 10th Mountain soldier. Obviously all these guys are. He is credited with the idea to use shorter skis. Do you guys all remember the gradulated, the LGM method? So Cliff Taylor, so when they came back from the war, they weren't like, oh, we're just going to use the same skis, boots, and poles. Like, no, they made things better. You can also look in timelines of skis in the museum that we have. They're the reason why that laces went away, and we have metal buckles, like all of this stuff. So that's Fritz Benedict. Fritz Benedict was the architect. He helped plan Vail, Snowmass, and Breckenridge. He also studied under Frank Lloyd Wright, and he is one of the founders of the 10th Mountain Division hut system. So he's the architect that created a lot of those. So, and that was something that was very modeled after what they did those hut systems in Europe. This is an interesting, so this is Walter Prager, and he was the Dartmouth ski coach, he was teaching them when they were known as, for those baseball fans, they were known as the New York Yankees of ski racing. Dartmouth has a long storied history of ski racing and winning races, and Walter Prager was at the front of this, and he's one of the reasons why they were so successful. They won 6 titles in the 30s, and then and Steve Knowlton also competed in the 1948 Olympic Winter Games. Steve Knowlton went on to be part of Aspen, but he also, so in 1948 they came back after post-World War, and it was the only second Olympics to feature alpine events because there was that big gap during the war. And he also coached the U.S. Olympic team and was there was an iconic race that happened in May of 1945, and it was called Mount Mangart Ski Race. And Steve Knowlton actually won that race, which is interesting. And then Chris Anthony has done, and if you want to learn about this ski race, he has a documentary film on it that's 2.5 hours long that all talks about this male. It's pretty incredible. So we are moving on to, this I found really interesting. So Gary Cunningham, 10th Mountain Division soldier, started Gary with a G, Mountain Sports in Denver, and is credited with being the first outfit to create backpacks with zippers. So do you remember the company Jerry? They had, so they were the first company that created modern day backpacks with a zipper. Because if you think about it, all the rucksacks and all the things that everybody carried before, they had that flap over it, and then you pull the string. So again, they revolutionized not just the ski industry, but the entire outdoor industry. David Bauer is one of the, I'm behind on my, that's David Bauer. David Bauer is, he started the Sierra Club. So can you imagine what the United States would look like without the Sierra Club? Like David, so they protect our lands. They did, they literally, there's so many places around the world that might have been developed if it was not for the Sierra Club. And David Bauer was a 10th Mountain Division soldier. So not only did they, again, it's not just the ski industry, it's the entire outdoor industry as we know it today. Any of you mountain climbers, like this is actually Paul Petzl. Paul Petzl was a celebrity before joining the 10th. He summited the Grand Tetons in 1924 at the age of 16. He was an expert mountain guide, he's helped started Outward Bound and National Outdoor Leadership School, which many of you, like I took a Knowles course when I was 18. I'm sure they told us that it was started by 10th Mountain, but I did not listen to anything that he says because I was 18. But how cool. So, and for those of you who don't know, Outward Bound is, they take troubled youth and children and kids and put them in the wilderness and hopefully they can help them with their anxiety or anything that they might have. But it was revolutionary in the 70s when he was doing this. This was not something that most people were doing. And then Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School is kind of more the elite side of it. Mm-hmm.
So was the Petzl rock climbing gear brand named for him, or did he start that?
He started it.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, again, he just started it. Right? Like, who knew? Like, all these guys. Now we're going to get into a little Summit County. So this is Larry Jump, along with Max Durkum, Thorpe Rosewald, Dick Durrance. They started A Basin. So Larry Jump and Max Durkum were both 10th Mountain Division soldiers. So A Basin would not be here 70. So A Basin just celebrated 75 years. This is the Durkum family. That's Max and Adina Durkum. They're both in the Colorado Snow Sports Hall of Fame. And their children still live in Summit County. See, this is where I wish I meant to put names on these because I've lost track a little bit. That is Larry Jump. So he's the one that also started. So then now we're going to move on to, this is Earl Clark. That's still Larry Jump, but I know. It's crazy. So Earl Clark was one of the 10th Mountain Division soldiers. He helped laid all the trails, and the organization of patrol at Loveland, Berthoud Pass, and Winter Park. So he was instrumental in a lot of, and we don't have photos of all these guys, but that's A Basin in the first year they opened. It's pretty cool. So when A Basin celebrated 75 years, it was 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, I can't remember. Their marketing department reached out to the museum and said, do you guys have any photos or videos? And so we have it all done. We sent him a link to everything. He was like, thank you. You just did my entire job with the whole season. He was like, this is incredible. So it made me really, I was like, I was practically in tears because I was like, this is why the museum is so important, because all these photos exist, but they exist in people's garages. They exist in attics. At least ours are organized, and we can literally send you, photo, a link, and then they're all there. So this is Thorpe Rosewald. These guys are, they started Winter Park. They're big over in Winter Park. These guys, they also were, they took the Weasel. So the Weasel is the little military kind of snow machine that they used, and they're the ones that kind of revolutionized and turned it into a snow cat. If any of you are driving by Idaho Springs, Idaho Springs has there's a fire, it's an old fire station that's turned into a museum. There's a Weasel in there, and it belongs to the museum, and it's on loan to the Idaho Springs Firehouse Museum right now. So Harold Sorensen, started the first ski jumping school at Winter Park. As we all know, Hallison Hill was here before. Yeah, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So Ted Bryan opened Aspen's first ski lodge. And now the photos are kind of getting out of, but these are just a few things that I have found out. Ben Klein started Sugar Bowl in California, Sugar Bush in Vermont, and Whiteface Mountain in Lake Placid. So one gentleman is responsible for 3 pretty big ski resorts in the United States. And Lake Placid finally did host the Olympics again in 1980. Whiteface Mountain was where they held the alpine skiing events. So again, the 10th mountain goes all the way back to the 1980 Olympics in the United States. That is Winter Park. And then here we're going to get into Gordy Wren. That's Gordy Wren. He managed Loveland. Then he went up to Steamboat. And he came up with the phrase Ski Town USA. Like he's the one that created that Ski Town USA for Steamboat. And he was an Olympic skier on top of being a 10th Mountain Soldier. His family was in the museum a couple weeks ago, and they were blown away by all the archives and everything that we had on him. So it's pretty incredible. I like his goggles. Look how cool they are.
I like his ski shirt.
Yeah, like yeah. Right. Yeah, so there's the original ski jump. I know, at Hallison Hill and Steamboat. Isn't that crazy? So this is Paul Duke. He was he was the executive manager at Breck. So I mean, they touched everything. Like it wasn't. And then this is Torgel Topol. He was a world championship ski jumper. He was a Norwegian. And that was another whole phenomenon that kind of happened in the 10th Mountain Division, because I was saying a lot of the coaches and other people, a lot of those people were Norwegian because, as we all know, Scandinavians are born with skis on their feet. So of course, if you're the Dartmouth ski team, you're going to hire a Norwegian. But what had happened was this whole Norwegian contingency, because also when they recruited from Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan, as we all know, there's a lot of Norwegians that settled in there. They also signed up. And that's another whole story we could talk about. The Norwegians and how they fought alongside of the 10th Mountain Division. And as a U.S., they were Norwegians, but they were U.S. Like some of them didn't have Greek, they were not considered U.S. citizens. But at that time, the Army was like, you're in. I mean, because they had such skills. That's a whole nother. But at Tennessee Pass, which I'm sure you've all been to, there's the memorial to the 10th Mountain Division, the fallen soldiers. Next to it is all the Norwegian soldiers that also lost their lives. Why do I have... Oh, here it is. Shelton Leonard became the University of Nevada ski coach and formed the International Federation of Mountain Soldiers, dedicated to transcending violence through a mutual love of mountains, snow, and skiing. He also he also appeared as the stunt double for this Abbott and Costello movie. I was like, why did I bring that up? There you go. And then it all goes back to obviously this is Minnie Dole. So, it wasn't, and then Lou Whitaker, who I think that's kind of a famous name, founded RIM Expeditions, a big mountaineering company. He was all set for medical school after the war, but his quote was, I was confident I wanted to spend the rest of my life in the mountains. And he has a million other quotes, but it all goes back to Minnie Dole. So, and I feel like every skier in the United States somewhere probably has a run named after Minnie. But many of these 10th Mountain men, of course we meet men, families that were like, oh, my dad was a dentist when he came back. Like, they all didn't but they did really create the ski and the outdoor industry as we know it today. literally referred, like he wrote, looking back, this is Minnie Dole. Looking back, each member of our group could legitimately be called a founding father of a new sport of skiing in America. And that included, so they went on to create the National Ski Areas Association, Robert Langley, and Robert Livermore, 1936 Olympic skier, and Alex Bright of the Boston Ski Club. They created the National Ski Association of Skiers. So it's pretty incredible. So what started as this frenetic effort, for one last attempt to push in order for us to win the war, blossomed into a dedicated community of skiers and winter sports enthusiasts that truly made skiing what it is today. Stories of the 10th Mountain Troops flow through the veins of the modern ski industry. The ski industry in its present form simply would not exist without the 10th today. This division was a receptacle for practically the entire body of knowledge of skiing at that time. Everyone in the world with an expertise in skiing or mountain climbing with anything to do with the outdoors seemingly found their way to the 10th Mountain Division. These guys experimented, tinkered with all the new equipment. They were called Eisenhower's guinea pigs, aka the Playboys, and were given new technologies that they altered and improved upon. Once they returned, they didn't stop tinkering, helping Howard Head design the famed Head Standard skis to make skiing more accessible to beginners and novices while still satisfying the elite skiers as well. So the passion of these men, along with their diverse talent, both athletic, intellectual, formed a critical mass transformation of what was a small, elite pastime into a national industry, which all of us in this room are so thankful that they did. So that's kind of the end of my official presentation. So thank you to Minnie Dole, and thank you. That's a photo of Camp Hale. It's just incredible. And they truly transformed the entire, like I said, there were 10,000 skiers before the war, and now there's 21 of us. So it really is just incredible that they created that, they created all of these, Breckenridge, Ski Cooper, like all of these resorts would not exist without the 10th Mountain Division. And today, this is where we are. Like, it's all icon, epic. I mean, it's everything, right? So that's it.